Hi there, everyone. This is Tricia Mims with National Park Partners, joined today by our board member, John Edwards III. And John, thanks so much for being with me to celebrate Black History Month and talk a little bit more about your experiences.
My pleasure, Trish.
Well, I'd like to start out by asking you to let our guests know a little bit about you, about your background, and how you came to be producing the Chattanooga News Chronicle newspaper.
Well, originally I came here from Nashville in 1963 on the heels of the Nashville sit-in that was led by John Lewis. I was one of the youngest people participating in the Nashville sit-ins, and that was probably because that the church where the sit-ins were launched, First Baptist Church, Capitol Hill, my dad had been youth pastor there, and the Reverend Kelly Miller Smith, who's probably one of the leading civil rights leaders in the city or in the state at that time, was a close friend of Dr. King, and he was on the board of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, and he allowed John Lewis and the students to organize the march out of his church. So having grown up in that church, I talked to my dad, told my dad I really wanted to participate. It was sort of a feeling that this was going to be an historical event, and it was just something, just a feeling that you just had, especially in the African-American community, that this was going to be something special. And I sit on the front row. I saw John Lewis and Diane Nash. A lot of people don't talk about Diane Nash, but Diane Nash is considered the queen of the civil rights movement. She worked right alongside John Lewis, and she organized the Freedom Riders as well. But they were both students and at Fisk University, and Lewis was at the Baptist Theological Seminary where my father graduated from. But after that, we moved to Chattanooga, and my father continued to be involved in civil rights, and he succeeded Reverend C.T. Vivian at Cosmopolitan Community Church. And C.T. Vivian was also an iconic civil rights figure. He was at the church, and he was really getting ready to organize his civil rights activities. And Dr. King called him to take over the SCLC affiliates. The chapters were growing all over the country, and they needed somebody to be in charge. And he called him to do that. And he recommended my father take over his church, and he did. And my father just picked up where he left off, and he integrated housing and medical facilities in Chattanooga. He's known for that. But so I grew up in a civil rights family. And in 1969, I think one of the worst things that happened was our house got firebombed. And on all four sides, they put 2 firebombs in the windows, and that was an indication that they tried, they didn't want anybody to get out alive. So that was a front page. I have an article here. This is in 1969. And can you see that?
Yeah. Yes, I can.
Yeah, 1969 in the, that's the Free Press. Yeah, you can see that. So,
incredible, John. Where was your house at that time?
In Fort Wood.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a church parsonage in Fort Wood, and historic house still standing there today.
Wow.
But I was in Vietnam during the time, and I didn't know it happened until about a week before I came back. And they sent me a letter telling me about what had transpired. So when I got out of the cab, all I could see was a house. I could still smell the smoke and see the damage in the front. So it was I wouldn't say I was traumatized. I was angry, but I had been in combat for quite a while. And so it wasn't too much that was going to traumatize me. So I was just happy that my family was not hurt. And, but I continued, it's amazing. I'm involved with Mary Walker Historical and Education Foundation. That's a
Yes,
project that I've continued, that my father started. And ironic, let me show you some. Let me show you that paper again. Ironic, the day that this was on the front page, it was the day that Mary Walker died.
Wow.
Can you see that?
Yes, sir.
That's the day that Mary Walker died.
Amazing.
And amazing. Somehow, my father took an interest in Mary Walker. You know, she had learned to read and write at an age of 117, was proclaimed the oldest student in the United States. And he went in another direction. At the time, I think it was President Carter was in office, and the reading levels of children and adults were at their lowest point in America. And he thought that he could use her as a role model. And she was already doing some stuff for the Chattanooga area literacy movement, but he wanted to focus in the African-American community as well, you know. And he started the Mary Walker Historical and Educational Foundation. And to learn more about Mary Walker, we had to study more about history, more about slavery and the antebellum period. And he just launched himself into it and kind of drugged me into it too. So it just finally, I resisted for a while because I wanted to do something else, you know. And we began to study history. My background was in art. I have a history minor. My background was in art. And I started to, after the research, I started to develop exhibits so we could raise funds and get sponsors. And we did pretty good. One of our first exhibit, when the King, when they passed I think the law that made it King a national holiday, Dr. King a national holiday, one of our exhibits on Dr. King, because my father had been so much involved in that civil rights movement, SCLC, he had a lot of memorabilia from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So we built an exhibit around that. And it just so happened that there was an event at the Bessie Smith Hall, and a lot of the African-American legislators were there. And they were getting ready to do a King celebration. We had a mobile museum. And Mrs. Fields, who was director there, she asked me to bring the mobile museum down there. And we had the civil rights exhibit on there, and Dr. King. And when the legislators saw it, it was a Black Legislative Caucus. They asked us, would we participate in the first ML King celebration? And we used the bus, and we drove all over Tennessee. I think with the Knoxville, Memphis, and in Nashville, we were the main exhibit at the Capitol. So that was a real good start. And we developed several exhibits, African American inventions, and we partnered with the Regional History Museum at that time, and they helped us really put the glass on our exhibits. I mean, they fixed them up really nice, and we worked together, and they helped me develop some really great exhibits, because we didn't have a lot of resources, but they did. So that's how I got started in that area. And then it started, partnering with other people who were interested in history and African-American history, and got on several boards and things like that. But I was I joined a friend asked me to join the Chattanooga JCs, and Chattanooga JCs were big at that time, really huge leadership training organization. I got involved with the little publication that we used to put out for first for our chapter, and then they asked me to work on the state with a newsletter. And in our local chapter, we didn't have the money to produce a newsletter. So I told them, I said, I would produce it. And evidently I didn't have a job at that time. I hadn't had a job for a couple of years after I got out of Vietnam, because it was kind of difficult. My father wasn't the most popular person in the world because of his civil rights activity, and we had the same name. And I think it worked against me. And it's being a combat veteran, people kind of feel uncomfortable with you, and probably something I should have left off my resume. And didn't. It was a long time before I got a job. And but so I had to try to work and earn money in different ways. So I used the newsletter to, I got advertisement for the newsletter, and they let me keep the money if I gave them a free newsletter. So I published the newsletter, I sold advertising, and that's kind of Then I got into a publication called Mr. and Mrs. Black Shopper. It had no editorial content, it just had ads, you know. And organizations like the NAACP, Push Excel, they asked us to put stuff in there for them because they were trying to work in the community. Could we put some editorial content? And that was when it led me into newspaper business. I was probably the first person to get an ad from, it was Red Food Store at the time. I don't know how far you go back. The Red Food Store morphed into now Food City, but it was Red Food Store was a local owned store. So I got Red Food was our biggest ad. You know, it almost paid for the paper once a week. So another company took, make a long story short, another company took over a Red Food Store. I think it was a German-owned company, and they wouldn't advertise with us. So here I am, you know, back out of a job. An African-American writer, the first writer, Clarence Scape, who worked for the Times Free Press, he started his own paper called, let me think of the name. But anyway, he started his own paper. And he asked me if I would come and be an advertising director. I know what he wanted. He wanted Red Food Store, and he knew I had a relationship with him. Well, I worked for him. I got Red Food Store, and in a small African-American paper, you have to do a lot of things. So I started learning practicing how to write. I got the camera. I would stay after hours and go to different events and banquets, and and take pictures. I realized how much control they had with the camera. It was just exciting. I'm going up front and I'm telling the elected officials, to stand here. Maybe the governor's there, and I said, you stand here, and people got to know me. And I said, well, this was a lot of fun. It's a position of power, And I started, selling advertising. Got pretty good at selling advertising. I was the #1 salesman for the company, the primary salesman. So anyway, a few years it went under, and everybody there knew that I really wanted to continue the paper. I wasn't in charge, so I didn't have any control of where the paper went, but it went out of business for lack of whatever. I mean, it lasted about 4 or 5 years, but I tell people, when you have a dream and you need to share it with other people, because sometimes the information doesn't come directly to you, it comes to other people. So there was a group out of Nashville who came to Chattanooga and wanted to start a paper. They had started one in Knoxville and Nashville. They wanted to start a paper here. They got in touch with the other people, the people who had previously had a paper, and they were just through with it. They said, but you need to go see John Edwards. He's still got a fire for a newspaper. He's still, he's still interested in it. So they came to me. They said they would give me an office and they would pay me, and if I operate the paper, I gave them a counter offer. I said, you don't have to pay for my office. You don't have to give me a salary. I said, give me 25% of the paper, and I'll take care of the rest, because I had advertising contact. So they did that. I leveraged it into 50%. A little later on, we had a little disagreement, and I started my own paper. I changed it from Chattanooga Courier to Chattanooga News Chronicle, and that's how I got into the newspaper business.
Wow, that's a fascinating story. I love it. And I keep thinking about how we've come far as a country in many ways, but then not maybe I know we still got a long ways to go. But even thinking about how Vietnam veterans were treated when they first got back, and now of course there's a lot more respect and admiration and
totally different, Tricia.
Totally different. Yeah.
Totally different. When we came back there, no parades, nothing. We just kind of came in through the back door, and no recognition whatsoever. I'm glad to be on a trustee on the board of the Medal of Honor Museum, Charles H. Cooters Medal of Honor Museum, and we get a chance to recognize the soldier's contribution, because soldier, I was drafted, but when your country calls, it's our responsibility to answer the call. That's your responsibility as a citizen of the United States. So sometimes you don't question whether your country's right or wrong. You just answer the call.
Mhm.
So why would you blame the soldier for his certain, for
Right.
what he's done, So that's the way I felt. And I think that changed after the Desert Storm and those different conflicts where they had more respect for the soldiers, and that kind of merged into the Vietnam veteran. They start putting us all together and respecting everybody's service for that. So it's much different, Every day, if when I wear my little Vietnam veteran cap, and people just stop, and I'm at a restaurant, they'll come over and say, "Thank you for your service." I mean, all the time, 2 or 3 people, and it's just so special,
Well, it's I hate that it wasn't that way, when you first got home, especially on the heels of what had just happened with your family's home. And I know that's just one sort of really sad example of the civil rights era, maybe, and that there were just a lot of pushback, people who were very resistant to
Mhm.
the idea of equal rights and civil rights and so
Yeah.
forth. And are there any other stories that stand out
Well,
in your mind from that
Well,
era?
we in '63, right before I came to Chattanooga, we went to Birmingham for it was the 1963 conference of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. At that time, African Americans could not stay in any major hotels, well, not really any hotels. And we were fortunate enough to stay in a Black-owned hotel.
Mhm.
Uh, he was owned by a man named A.G. Gaston. He was one of the first, among the first African-American millionaires in the country. And he owned almost a whole block in downtown Birmingham. And he had restaurant, and he had the hotel, and he had a radio station, insurance company. And to meet a man like that it made an impression on me.
Mhm.
I remember us sitting in the restaurant eating, and my dad was, as all the iconic figures were walking through, uh, Andrew Young, John Lewis, Dr. King, and I got a chance to shake his hand and stuff like that. And so when they came through, he was identifying. It was my dad and my next oldest brother were there. And we just loved to ride our dad's coattail. We got a chance to spend a lot of time with him there because
Mhm.
that's what he did. So anyway, when Mr. Gaston walked through, he said, "That's A.G. Gaston, and he's the one that made it possible for us to do this." I felt like a first-class citizen sitting in a restaurant, where I wanted to. I mean, I was staying in a hotel, and Jesse Jackson was in the room next door. And I mean, I'm 15 years old. So it was an awesome experience. And when I went back home, I learned as much as I could about A.G. Gaston.
Mhm.
And he had and I think that's where I kind of put the business person. I wanted to be, it instilled in me that I wanted to someday run my own business,
Mhm.
and be my own man. And it didn't happen right away, of course, but I think it was instilled in me.
Mhm.
But I read his story, and he had a saying that stuck in my mind ever since I was in junior high school. He said, "Success is founded in seeing and satisfying the needs of the people." So if you can find a need, then you satisfy, and you are almost 100% to be successful. So when I started, when it was opportunity came for the paper, uh, I saw that there was still a need for it. There was a need for an African American newspaper. We didn't have one. I went to Mr. McDonald. This was not the father, but the son at the time at the Free Press,
Mhm.
and sit down and talk with him. Much different person from his father. He helped me. He gave me technical support, and he used to tell everybody that I came over and just picked his brain. I don't know if you ever met him. He was a phenomenal person. And I happened to be at an event at the Choo Choo where we both spoke. And I was sitting next to him, and that's when I got a chance to ask him that I needed his help. And so he invited me to his office, and we talked, and everything that I couldn't do, I didn't have the technology to do, I would send it to him and he would have it done. He actually assigned me a person at the Free Press to take care of my needs, things that I needed, help that I needed. And that was awesome.
That's amazing.
This is a white man. He didn't have to do that. And I'll always
But he
appreciate.
Believed in you. He believed in what
he
you
did.
were doing.
And that's important too. When people believe in you, it makes you want to be successful.
That's good. Well, thank you for sharing that, John. One of the things that we've been working on with the national park is working on telling these kind of stories of before, during, and after the war, kind of a civil war to civil rights, because I think our national park is such an asset, not only for the history, but as a way to really find a way to connect people through all the many different types of history in our region, and especially in our city. And you participated in our walking tour. We had a downtown African American historic sites tour that we've done a couple times now in conjunction with the Park Service. And you spoke on that tour. We had the stop there at the corner of 7th and Market, where the fire hoses were used for the first time during some of the marches. And I know we've talked briefly a little bit about kind of the difference between sort of the early civil rights movement in Nashville, which maybe was a little bit bigger of a city and had people coming in from all over, versus in Chattanooga. And can you talk a little bit more?
Well, Trish, the difference in Nashville that, is a reason that Nashville is called the Athens of the South. You have so many universities, so black, black and white. And you have American Baptist Theological Seminary, which is an African-American divinity school. You have Tennessee State University. You have Fisk University. You have Meharry Medical College. So you had all of those students and those young, brilliant minds, coming together, wanting to make change, and led by a person like John Lewis and Diane Nash. It was just awesome. You had other leaders, but these were the people who were like at the forefront. I think John Lewis spent more time in jail than any other civil rights leader, and he was beaten more, than any other civil rights leader. And that was a phenomenal. And the church where my father had been youth minister was located right downtown, so strategically. So all we had to do was march a block or two to be right in the heart of downtown. And let me tell you this one story before I get back to that. I was at in Atlanta at a called a Nazi meeting. These are African-American hospital executives. I was about 400 people in the place, and John Lewis was the keynote speaker. And when he got through, people gave him a standing ovation. I was sitting on the other side of the room. So I'm going to go over and speak to him. So I know he wouldn't remember me, and I was just a kid then. So I walked over, and it was strange. I got about 10 feet away from him, and looked like the crowd just kind of opened up for me to walk through. And I don't want to say this was a religious experience, but it did. I felt, and when it did, I felt strange. And because when he looked at me, I didn't want him to think. He looked directly at me, and I said, I hope he doesn't think I'm threatening or anything like that. So I walked up to him and I said, Mr. Lewis, and I told him who I was and about the church where we worked when I was a kid, sitting on the front row, and how he had impressed me and been a role model for me all my life. But I had to find something that I could say that he knew that I was there. I told him, I said, when you gave me my group our marching orders, we marched in front of a restaurant called Cross Keys. He looked at me, he said, I haven't heard that name in 70 years. He said, I hadn't heard that name. He said, and he knew it. He grabbed me and hugged me in front of all that people, just embraced me, and we hugged. That was one of the greatest moments in my life.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that.
I'll bet.
And so anyway, talking about what we were talking about, I think it was a great thing that we were doing the march. I mean the history march. I hope we
Yes, the walking tour.
continue to do that, because you always have new generations of people coming along. We ought to continue to do that every so often.
Absolutely.
And we got a chance to talk about some Black history that a lot of people didn't know. But talking about Chattanooga, and we were talking about the difference. Nashville was successful. That helped Nashville be successful, that participation.
Mhm.
But in Chattanooga, all you had was a high school. You didn't have any college. You had Howard High School. So I think these young people haven't seen what happened in the sit-ins and the first sit-ins in Carolina.
Mhm.
That it left an impression on them, and they wanted to do something here in Chattanooga. So they organized and they marched downtown on that day in 1960, and they did what they had to do, because they didn't have any universities here. They had to stand up and step up, rather, and take the charge and do that. Yeah.
Well, they're incredibly brave.
Yeah, incredibly brave.
For them.
And a lot of the parents didn't like it.
I'm sure they were
Yeah,
scared for them. Yeah,
I mean, they were concerned. They were concerned about them. It's a danger. When you do that. I know the danger of it.
sure.
I've been there. I was fortunate enough not to ever get hit, but I've seen other people get beaten, and I was spit on in Birmingham for the first time.
Mm.
That was an experience.
Goodness.
Mhm.
Well, John, we're so grateful to have you on our board and kind of bringing your perspective and helping us, kind of grow as an organization to expand our mission and really think more broadly. And so very much appreciate that. Is there any last thoughts you'd like to leave us with in terms of Black History Month or anything significant for Chattanooga?
Well, when my father and I first started doing this, it wasn't a whole lot of information out there about African Americans and about their contributions. And Carter G. Woodson, Professor Carter G. Woodson of Harvard, educated African American, he initiated Black History Week, which became in the bicentennial became African American History Month. And it was his hope that through the celebration of African American history, that all ethnic groups would come together and appreciate each other's contribution. And and sometimes when I'm working, and I had an exhibit out to Hamilton Place Mall when the mall first opened.
Mhm.
And it was on, some of it was on Black African Americans in the Civil War. I ran into a fellow downtown at the bank, a white guy, and he said, "You're the one that had that exhibit out at the mall." He said, "I never knew that African Americans were even involved in the Civil War, that they even participated." He said, "Now I have a better understanding and a better respect for African Americans, for their history." And right away, I thought, well, I'm doing exactly what Carter G. Woodson said. And, and I see what he meant by that. But as we, and that as we work together and do things together, we respect each other, we work through each other, we work together. And that's what it's all about, to educate a lot of people.
That's right. My father has an expression. I mean, it's not unique to him, but a lot of times he'll say, I didn't know what I didn't know, right?
Yeah.
So until you know something or learn something, it's easy to have either not even the wrong idea, just no idea, that of the different contributions that have been made over the years. And I really appreciate what you said about sort of everyone's collectively embracing all heritages. Certainly a lot of what we do with the national park involves the American Indian legacy. And there's a lot of
and it should
similarities with
exactly.
social justice and issues there. So yeah, thank you.
Well, you're doing a great job, Chris. I enjoy working with you. I had double hip surgery, so I missed a couple of meetings, but I'm back on my feet now, ready to go.
All right, well, let's get to it. Maybe when the weather warms up and it's safe to kind of
Yeah,
do things as a group again, we'll get another walking tour in the books. On the
sounds
book.
great.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time, and God bless, and my best to Miss Faith. Okay.
I will. Thank you.
Y'all take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.